What's up, guys? Welcome back to the PL Pod right here on YouTube. I am Daniel and we are back with another week and another podcast. It's been an interesting week this past weekend and there's a lot to dive into. We've got a very special guest online, but we'll get to him in just a second. Before we do get to that, subscribe. Please go down below, hit the subscribe button. It's nice, big and red. It's really hard to miss it. Go down there, click that. Turn on all notifications as well, of course. Like the video and comment down below what you think about what we're going to say. And yeah. What do you think about what we're going to say, really? Go over, follow the Instagram, obviously, Dan Talks Football, and the TikTok. That started up a couple of weeks ago, and I am getting a clip out on there every week like I promised I would. So go on there and follow that, support that, and I'd greatly appreciate it. Right, moving on to the guest we have on the line tonight, and it's one I've actually been excited about for an awful long time. He's a Spurs fan, so I will not be singing about any team finishing third in any two-horse races tonight, even though it's very tempting. It's the Spurs News. How are you doing, mate?
Hi, mate. Yeah, all good. Thank you for having me on.
No worries, mate. It's an absolute pleasure of mine. As I say, you've been someone that I've followed for an awful long time and the best place to go for all Spurs news. So go and make sure you follow him over on Instagram to keep up to date with all things Tottenham Hotspur. Right, Speaking of Spurs, we will start with the weekend's fixtures by talking about your 2-0 win over Everton. We'll obviously focus more in on Spurs later and how you've been doing as a season as a whole, but how do you think both sides played in this fixture?
Yeah, I was there at the game. It was a decent atmosphere. I think for the first 45 minutes, Spurs, we were pretty slow to get out the gates. We have been this season quite consistently slow in many areas. Everton had quite a few chances that they should have taken. I think Gray and Onana had sort of one-on-ones that they both bottled coming into the box. But again, in the second half, it seems to be fairly consistent throughout the rest of the games. We picked up a bit. Richarlison, I think, picked up an injury around 50, 60 minutes into the game, which forced us into a formation change as well. The 3-5-2 is something that us as fans we've been calling out for quite a while. I think definitely after that change, we looked so much more positive. The fans were on the team, were raring to go. The Everton fans, to be fair to them, were pretty good as well. They were cheering through and through because I think 0-0 after 60 minutes, they were feeling quite confident with their chances. But I think as soon as that penalty went in, it was sort of game from there. We were looking good every time we went forward. Because we were 1-0 up, it meant Everton had to come out, which we sort of exposed. And then again, we should have probably had one or two more, maybe taken our chances. But Everton equally should have probably picked up maybe one or two goals if they were more crucial with their chances.
I've watched Everton quite a bit because I've got a couple of Everton mates, and Demarai Gray, a man that obviously being a former Leicester player, I've watched a lot, and he just can't finish his dinner at all. He can't finish anything. It was the same when he was at us. We picked him up as a 18-year-old from Birmingham, I think, for a couple of million. And he reminds me of Adama Traore without the baby oil and the muscles.
Yeah,
he's got pace.
Dribbling. Yeah,
great at dribbling, but he can't finish at all. So yeah, bad result for Everton in the end, but seemingly it was a good performance. They've absolutely got enough to stay up. How far do you think they could possibly push on this season?
Yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one because, again, you look at compared to last season where they were so close to relegation. At one point you thought it was done and they managed to stay up. But I do think big results this season, like drawing to Liverpool and actually beating West Ham, are some good results for them. I mean, they did lose Richarlison, obviously, to us, being one of their main strikers, their main source of goals. It was difficult to see where their goals would come from. But Anthony Gordon, he's doing okay. Obviously didn't play against us due to his suspension, so we were quite lucky in that aspect. And I guess Everton fans are just hoping Calvert-Lewin comes back because his injuries seem to be holding him back a bit. But I think if they do maybe some smart business in January with attacking force, I reckon they'll be able to stay up.
100%. Yeah, I think there's definitely three teams worse than them in this league, and I think I could see them finishing 14th, 15th. You mentioned him there, Anthony Gordon. Now, he was also linked with that big move to Chelsea in the summer, and was also linked to you guys, I think, for around the same kind of price. Not that you were going to pay it, of course, because it's stupid money. He's not worth that much, is he?
In my opinion, no, I don't think he is. I think the rumoured fee for us and Chelsea was around 40 to 50 million in the end. And especially for Spurs, there is no chance we would spend any type of money for someone like him. I think at the time he had only scored maybe 2 or 3 league goals. He had only just made his breakthrough season for Everton, I'm pretty sure. So for a player of his quality, he's good, don't get me wrong, but he's not a 40-50 million pound player at the moment.
No, I fully agree with that. He's all right, and he looked like a good player to push on for Everton. 20-30 million, sure, if it was going to be that kind of price you could go for it and sort of take the risk on him, but after a couple of good months, it's nowhere near worth it, and you could have been looking at a very bad decision at this point in the season if he hadn't sort of made it into the side for that kind of money. We'll move on to Wolves versus Forest now. Forest are a side that we've talked about a lot on this show because they're just not good enough, and they made a really interesting decision a couple of weeks back now to give Steve Cooper a new long-term contract at the club when many fans were calling for his head. I talked to quite a few of the fans sort of off the podcast, one of them being Charlie, who you've heard on it before, and they all sort of said he's not the man. He took us up, and that's absolutely incredible of him. We'll always remember him, but if we want to try and stay up, he won't keep us up. And that was the gist. They would have been fine with sort of him staying and taking the side back down, but if they were going to try and stay up, he wasn't the man to do that, and they should have tried to maybe get in a Dyche. He signed a new contract, which you presume means that he will stay. However, do you think he should stay?
Yes, again, another tricky one. I think he's a decent manager, but I'm not sure if Premier League is his level. As you said there, I'll echo your comments. He did well to take Forest up, and again, I'm happy to see them back in the Premier League, but I don't know whether he's the man to keep them up. I agree with the Forest fans there. They just need to step up that next level to be able to install sort of some football that will keep them in the Premier League.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I look at them, and obviously I watched them last season quite a few times, one of them being a game I am still trying to forget when they beat us 4-1 at the City ground. But they looked like a really good side last season. Brennan Johnson was really shining in that side and was being linked with the top move this summer. However, he hasn't looked the same player since they've got into the league, and Forest just haven't looked the same team because they're not. They've signed 22, 23 players this summer, which is absolutely mental in all honesty. So, personally, he signed a new contract. If he signed that new contract because the owner in Marinakis is happy for them to go back down, sell off probably half of those players they brought in, but then rebuild in the Championship and then come back up, do a Norwich, but actually try and then stay in the league that second time, that's fine, because I think he would bring them back up again. Do I think he's good enough? I'm not sure. So it's an interesting one to see where it goes, but I mean, is it Rob Edwards, the former Watford and Forest Green manager, if he's good enough to get interviews at Wolves and stuff, then who knows nowadays. But yeah, Steve Cooper, interesting to see what happens with this one, and I'm very prepared to be on him in a couple of weeks saying he's been sacked after signing a contract 4 weeks ago. What's gone on?
Wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't surprise me at all. Marinakis is ruthless, so we'll have to see what happens with that one. Moving on to Wolves. Now, they also won this game 1-0 without a manager in the dugout. The former Sevilla boss actually rejected Wolves' approaches this week, and he had seemed to be the front runner for that job. Large obviously got sacked after a dismal start to the season, only scoring 3 goals. With, I understand he had attacking problems there with Kalajic picking up an ACL 45 minutes into his debut, which is gutting and is super harsh for Large after that was the man he wanted. Who do you think Wolves should go out and get, though, to replace Bruno Lage?
As a Spurs fan, it's hard to say this, but I do see them going back for their old manager Nuno. I mean, as you say, they didn't have a great start, and it's understandable why Bruno Lage was shown the door. But I think you've seen it a lot as well. They've been linked with Nuno quite a bit. He's the only manager I can see getting in there. Again, you mentioned Julian Lopetegui as well. I genuinely thought that would be his chance to come to the Prem, because I would love to see his football in the Premier League, see how it goes. But he's already rejected that opportunity, so I think Nuno might be their only go-to manager. I mean, we're only 10 games into the season, so I can't see them going to another Premier League club and saying, look, we want your manager, or another La Liga club. So I think Nuno might be their best option.
It would interest me so much to see how he comes back to do after he initially left on those mutual terms. Went to Spurs, obviously, and didn't quite work out. I'll let you in a little bit of secret here, those at home. I was actually thinking about doing a manager tier list instead of the rumoured transfers, which is going to be coming up later on, but I decided not to. But I would have been very interested to see where you would have put Nuno in that. I'm sure it would have been in the bottom tier. Yep.
Absolutely bottom.
I could have expected that, but no, I'd be interested to see if Nuno does come back. If not Nuno, I mean, it's Wolves though. Here's the thing. Could they go for a Bruno Amorim? Possibly, but does he give up that opportunity? I know it's Wolves, and I know they like their Portuguese man, but does he give up the opportunity he's got out in Portugal at the moment, playing in the Champions League? I'm not sure. They're not going to go for Sean Dyche because, again, it's Wolves and he's not Portuguese. You know, someone like Rafa, I could possibly see. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah,
it's
maybe.
Wolves. That's the issue. They like their Portuguese people, so Nuno does just make sense.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, their Portuguese links are practically every player in the Portuguese team. I'm surprised they didn't sign Ronaldo the other year. but yeah, I mean, there are a couple of people possibly from Liga NOS that they could think of bringing in, but you bring up the good thing of, yes, it's Premier League, but do you as a manager give that opportunity to play Champions League football? I mean, it's every player and manager's dream, isn't it? So maybe if it was coming towards the end of the season and people knew where they were in terms of the league and how far they got in the Champions League, but at the moment I don't think Wolves could tempt anyone away.
I mean, there's another option which personally I can't see happening, but is being linked with jobs like Aston Villa. What do you think of Poch?
Poch, of course, as a Spurs fan, is in our hearts, and we only want to see success for him. It's a shame that PSG didn't work out for him, but we all know what kind of ruthless club that is inside, as you can see from the Mbappe situation, for example. But the thing is with Poch, he's waiting for that opportunity. I get the feeling for another big club. I think he rejected the opportunity for Nice just a month or two back. So I'd say Wolves are probably on a similar level to Nice, maybe. Yeah. So although Premier League football could be tempting for him, with Poch in the past, I just don't know if he'd go there.
Fair enough. It'll be an interesting one to see what happens, and I'm watching this with close eyes. If it's not Nuno, if it's Nuno, I'm interested to see what happens. But if it's not, then I'm really not sure who they could get, and they could just pull somebody really strange out of the bag. We'll move on to the final game we're going to look at in depth, and that's the big one this weekend. Liverpool beating Man City by 1-0. A goal from the contract man himself, Mo Salah, after scoring that. After signing that huge contract in the summer, one that screamed Aubameyang to me and many others, looked like he was going to flop for the first few weeks of the season, hadn't been performing. Everyone had him in FPL at the start and everyone took him out because, he wasn't playing well. Do you think he's finally going to start performing, or have these games against Rangers and City just been one-offs?
It's difficult to say. I mean, Salah, don't get me wrong, he's a class player and he has been for the last few years. Probably one of the best for Liverpool, besides Mane, for example, and Van Dijk. But again, Salah just reminds me a little bit of Son this season as well. Both joint Golden Boot winners last season, and they're both fluctuated big time with their performances. Son obviously scoring a hat-trick against Leicester, and then yesterday against Everton he played okay, but he didn't have the best game. And I think Salah is a bit like that as well. Plays well against Rangers, plays well against City, but then sort of disappears and doesn't perform as consistently in the other games. But I do think with Salah and Son bringing him into it as well, I think it's just a matter of time before they get their shooting boots on and get back to their normal level.
There we go then. I have to keep an eye on him and make sure I'm not missing out on too many FPL points. Liverpool in general, huge win obviously, as I've just mentioned, versus Rangers in the week, winning that 7-1, which is just mental. A hat-trick from Salah in that game, of course, and Liverpool did look really, really good from the highlights I've seen. I've just asked if Salah's back. Do you think that Liverpool are back after a very bad start to the season for them?
Yeah, as you say, so for Liverpool it's a shocking start to the season, to be honest. They should be up there with Man City at the moment, and Arsenal, as much as I hate to say it, are up there as well. They should be level on points. If you look at the team that they have, I just think they need to be performing better, and maybe this is that turning point. As you say, 7-1 and 1-0 against City is a great result for them. So I think they are definitely on their way back up. As much as I don't want them to be, because again, that's another competitor for us.
Yeah.
But I think they are making moves.
Fair enough. And then we'll move on to Man City. I could go really, really in depth here and talk about the tactics of how Liverpool managed to stop Haaland. However, I haven't had enough time to sit down and actually look at the tactics for that yet. Yeah. So instead, we'll just talk about City in general. Arsenal are playing really, really well. I know you don't want to hear it, and it could be a very, very bad season for you if Arsenal do go on to win this league title, which could be a possibility, especially after City losing this one. It's obviously an off day for City, being after looking really, really good for spells this season, an off day for that Norwegian man, Erling Haaland. Do you think Arsenal can do it? I seem to be asking this every single week to every single guest, and I know you don't want to say yes here, but do you think they can do it?
I know I'm going to sound biased, but I don't think they will. I mean, don't get me wrong. They've had an excellent start to the season, and I'm an honest Spurs fan. I don't mind saying that. Yes, they've had a brilliant start, and fair play to them. They've played good football. They've beaten teams. Some of them a little bit controversial, as you've probably seen today with some VAR calls, but they have beaten them. But I just don't think they will do it. I think I was talking to a couple of my friends today. I think the World Cup coming in will just kill their momentum massively. Mm-hmm. They're on a big high at the moment, winning every game. They're feeling stronger and stronger. But being without club football for a month, I think will harm them massively. And I just don't think they'll do enough to do it. Top 4 possibly. But winning the league, if Haaland stays in the form he is, he's an absolute joke. I think they'll run it.
Yeah, the thing I'm worried about with Haaland is he's not going to the World Cup, so he has a month off to just recharge his batteries. Batteries really. Head back into the charging port and just re-energize all of his robot. I don't know. Just turn into an even better robot than he already is. I'm interested to hear that, because I must say last week I was talking to a Villa fan, and he said he thinks Arsenal can do it. So we've got a title race.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm happy to say that after City or Liverpool just dominating the league.
Yeah, I mean, for the last few years with City and Liverpool winning pretty much everything, it is nice to see some competition despite it being our main rivals.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one for you, but everyone thought that Conte could have been up there and pushing. So
we're close.
You're not that far off. I mean, there's a fight for the title, there's a fight for the top 4, and there's a fight for the top 6. I'm actually excited to say that for once, and it's not just gonna be dull.
Yeah.
Although then as well, a dull season like it's been the last few years, I would quite take actually as a Leicester fan, because then we'll be finishing 5th, and that'll be lovely. But instead we'll be going to Luton away, and I cannot wait. Right, said we would talk about this for too long, so we won't. FPL, how have you done this week?
I've done okay. I took 53 points this week. I forgot to actually substitute out Danny Ward for Sanchez, who actually did me a big favour. Danny Ward coming in with big 6 points.
Indeed.
I also had Trippier, who took his clean sheet today, and also Ivan Perisic, who I think grabbed an assist yesterday as well. Meaning we did good there. Had Kane in the team as usual. You've got to grabbing his penalty, so he got some good points there. Haaland I did have in as well. Obviously only came away with 2 points. He didn't do as well as I thought he would. Salah in there as well. Odegaard, Martinelli. I have a lot of Arsenal players despite being a Spurs fan. But yeah, overall not too bad. Could be worse.
Fair enough, mate. I finished up on 45. I played my wild card last week, as I told many I was going to, and I'm not regretting it, because I think I came up with a good side. However, I'm worried about how the City-Arsenal game being postponed midweek is going to affect my positioning. Definitely. I've got Meslier in goal, even though I had Danny Ward on the bench. Danny, why?
Just the 1 week.
Oh, you know what? Just leave. The amount of What was it? What have I been seeing? I've been seeing. I can't remember what it is now. Oh, well, I've been seeing. Obviously, for those that don't know, the club banned anybody from sending in any birthday messages to do with anything to do with Rodgers. So there were quite a few asking for a guy called Ben Schwartz to wish him a happy birthday. So I did bench Ward and he picked up 6 points. Screw you, Danny. Moving into the defence, Saliba got 5, Cancelo got 2, Trippier got 6, and Perisic got 8. 2 bonus points for Perisic this week. So huge from him. Did have Castagna on the bench, who picked up 6. Classic. Midfield, I had Maddison, Martinelli and Rashford. Only getting 6 points from the 3 midfielders isn't great. Had Andres Pereira on the bench as well, so it would have been better to start him in front of Rashford. And then the front 3 of captain Haaland. I wasn't going to captain him because he played Liverpool, but I also thought, well, it's Haaland, you can't not. And then Jesus and Kane. So disappointing week in all honesty this week. However, I'm still, top 475,000, 472, 618 so far this year. I was actually having a look at my statistics from the last year, and I think the PL pod might be doing me well because I've never finished in the top million before. So
not doing too bad.
No, I think this might be the year, and also nearly top 4,000 of all Leicester fans, which isn't awful, so I'll take it. If I can finish top 4,000 now, I would be absolutely buzzing. And also top 2 mini leagues. That's the most important thing because I've got Nando's on the lines here, and I don't want to be spending 100 quid on Nando's. So yeah, there's FPL, and there is the end of the There is the end of the first segment. So we'll take a short break before we come back to discuss the mighty Spurs, and we are back to start going through Tottenham Hotspur and what is going on at Tottenham Hotspur, which will probably be the title of this video. So what is going on at Tottenham Hotspur? How have these summer signings done?
Yeah, it's been a decent start for the majority of them. I think a couple of them, as we've mentioned, have not been given fair game time, but for the majority of them, been good. Richarlison's definitely come in as a fan favourite. I think, personally, we overpaid for him maybe a tiny bit. 60 million, I think it was in the end, was a bit high. But personally, I think he's done okay since he's come in. Has just picked it up an injury, so we wait to see how bad that will be. Yeah. I think he was talking about yesterday possibly missing the World Cup. So again, that's a month or so. It not even been at Spurs. So a few goals from him would have been nice, a couple of more. But again, he's got to get used to the whole system. So that's fair enough to him. Basuma as well, I think for how much we paid for him, around 25 to 30 mil. That's a great signing. I mean, he was probably outside of the top 6, maybe one of the best CDMs/centre mids last season. When the news came through that we were in for him, I was like, wow, okay, we're making some good moves here. He played yesterday against Everton for about 30 minutes. I think that was probably his best 30 minutes he's ever played for us. He looked really good in that midfield, in that 3-5-2, so that clearly suits him more than positions that we've played. We also signed that Destiny Udogie from Udinese, but he went straight back on loan. But from what I've seen, he's got a few goals and assists from wing-back, but he's definitely one for the future, still only being about 19 or 20, so fair enough. He's one Conte sees in the long run. Spence, I know we've sort of spoken about a little bit. He's a real funny one. I mean, the fans are all for him. He came on yesterday, I think, for the second time in about the 93rd minute or something, so he may as well have not come on. But yeah, the fans are all for him. They want to see him. But Conte, for whatever reason, just does not play him. He has said in the past that he was a club signing, which I think is a bit unfair on Spence, because that's essentially saying, look, I didn't want you. You were the club's investment, not mine. I don't know. It's a tricky one. I just think that the options we have at right wing back, being Emerson and Doherty, are nothing short of shambolic. Doherty, to be fair to him yesterday, played quite well, or well by his standards, but Emerson just is unbelievably poor. We paid way too much for him. I'm not sure who facilitated that transfer and why it went through, but again, with him starting every week, it makes the fans think, why is Spence not getting game time? There's no way he's this poor. Just give him a shot. I don't know whether Conte's scared to give him a shot, or he just thinks that Emerson's his man for some reason. Yeah.
One man I do want to touch on that wasn't mentioned there, Perisic. How's he got on so far?
Yeah, he came with a lot of excitement, Perisic. I mean, we all know his quality. He's a league winner in multiple leagues. He's won a few trophies, World Cup finalist against France a few years back. He came with a lot of expectation. He looked like he was going to sign for Chelsea at one point, but then ended up coming to us. But I just think he's been playing well, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if he's met people's expectations. There's been a couple of times where a cross didn't go as he planned, or he's come back into the defence, or he's too far forward and not tracking back enough. But a player of his sort of stature and his ability, he always gives you a decent performance. I wouldn't say world class, but he's one of those players I'm happy that we have in the club.
Fair enough. We touched on Spence just there. I'll ask you two questions, but the first one surrounding just Spence here. If he isn't going to play, if Emerson and Doherty are the two main options at right back, would a loan maybe suit him? I'm sure Forest would take him back on loan because they just love signing players. You know, possibly Wolves might want him as, you know, in that right back sort of position. Would a loan in January could be something that you could look at as a club if Conte really doesn't want him?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an option. As you say, I'm sure Forest would take him back, as they've actually currently got ex-Spurs man Serge Aurier, so he can't be much worse than him. But yeah, I think definitely if it comes to January and Spence still hasn't got much game time, I think he's going to try and push for that loan move, definitely, because a player of his age, he's still young, sort of late to sort of early 20s, I think he is. So a player of his ability and his expectation, he needs to be playing, and possibly going back to Forest could be the answer.
Fair enough. And then obviously talking about that sort of right back, right wing back position, in your opinion, not what Conte does, because obviously Conte looks like he wants to play Emerson there, who would you start at right wing back?
I do my predicted lineups every week, and I normally do, or my preferred lineups, and I normally do the same person every time. I actually put Perisic there.
Okay.
Because Perisic is a double-footed player. He can use both feet, and he has played right wing back at Inter before. So I think a player of his quality, they could adapt to that role if he was played there. But if we're talking sole right wing back, then I'd start Spence any day of the week.
Okay, fair enough. So it would be Spence. Wow, Conte, if you're listening, wake up and give Jed some game time. Maybe, you never know. Maybe he's a friend of Neil Warnock and didn't like the
comments.
the whole abuse last season between them two.
Yeah.
We've touched on outgoings, obviously, in potential outgoings which could happen through Spence leaving in January on a loan. Going back to the summer, the players that you let go both on loan and permanently, are there any of them which you wish you would have kept?
In all honesty, no. I think the squad we have now is good. I just think the players that we let go, it just didn't work for them. I think with Ndombele and Lo Celso, they're two players that everyone at the club had massive expectations for, given their price tag. And they're both players that everybody wants to see succeed. Like any player that comes into the club, every fan every time will give them the benefit and sort of say, look, we want you to succeed and we want you to perform. But they were here for sort of 2 to 3 years and did not do too much. So I think them being loaned out was the correct decision. If we do get a good offer for them in the future, I could happily see them being moved on. Then you have other players like Reguilon. He hasn't been to the club as long as they have, but I think with him it was a breath of fresh air from Ben Davies. So when he came in and played under Jose and we played 4 at the back, having him at left back was like, wow, we haven't seen this in a long time. But under Conte's style, I just don't think he fits that wing back role. Similar with Emerson on the other side, I don't think he's a right wing back. He's more of just a full back. But yeah, and then you have other players like Joe Rodon, who went out on loan, I think, to Rennes in the end.
Yeah.
He's one of those players that, again, just hasn't had enough game time. He's looked okay when he's come on in a couple of matches he played for us, but he didn't get a lot of game time at all. And I think he was probably one of those players that was pushing for that loan move because he knew he needed sort of more football to, again, he's got the World Cup to think about.
For sure, and Rodon is the one out of that I actually see a lot in. I really like Rodon. I thought he was really good when he was at Swansea, I want to say. He was somebody in the summer that I was a Leicester fan, was going, go sign him, he's available on a loan. But again, if we're not going to spend money, we're not going to bring in loans for some reason, which don't cost anything. We've spoken about transfers, and the main man that has obviously been around these transfers is Paratici. Now, this man is a man that works in mysterious ways. He came in 2 summers back now, I believe, coming in and almost got Nuno in, which was an interesting decision, shipped him out pretty quickly, and then got his man in Conte. How's Paratici done, and how much is he involved with the transfers himself? How much have you sort of made of him, and just how good is this mysterious bloke?
Yeah, Paratici is a very quiet one behind the scenes, but you can see how much influence he has on certain areas of the clubs. He's on the bench nearly every week, screaming and shouting at the players and stuff like that. But yeah, behind the scenes, he's definitely pulling a lot of strings. The majority of our business sort of seems now to be with Italian clubs. For example, sort of Romero, you had Kulusevski and Bentancur as well, all coming from Juventus and Atalanta. So he does like that Italian sort of style play, and to be fair to him, it's worked out really well for us. And then you also touched on Nuno as well. I think with Nuno coming in, I don't believe that was much of a Paratici decision. I think he went along with it, and then when it didn't work, that proved his point to Levy, and he said, look, we need Antonio Conte. Conte's your best option here. Conveniently, they were best mates, so it's, I think, pretty easy for him to get him in, get his friend a job, but look how well it's paid off for us.
Fair enough. He's a man that I see Fabrizio Romano talk about a lot as well. Obviously Romano being Italian, always going, this is a man that will just chase 10 targets at once and then at the final minute choose one of them, which is painful when you're trying to get the big news story. As I'm not quite there into that sort of field yet, but for those journalists who are trying to go, they're interested in this player, they could come out and say they're interested in 10 attacking midfielders, and everyone would go, what? No, they're not. Shut up. They are.
Yeah, it's very difficult to, again, sort of, I'm posting all the transfer news, and there's a new one coming out every 5 minutes, and everyone's like, oh no, this is fake news, You think it's actually not. Paratici just has his fingers in so many different pies. It's almost unbelievable.
Yeah, he's a man that he's a man that interests me a lot, and Spurs are a club now that every transfer window I'm keeping an eye on, because they'll do something crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
In the summer you brought in some really big household names early on. That Richarlison deal, which we've already touched on, a lot of money, but considering Everton spent £50 million on him a couple of years back, you can understand why you had to spend so much, because they obviously weren't going to make a loss on him. Perisic, household name when he came in, stealing him away from Chelsea as well. And I mean, you're just such a club. It's really nice to watch when your club's making transfers. Yeah,
I think with our club, we definitely seem to make the most transfers during the window. We don't sign huge players like your Erling Haaland or your Darwin Nunez for those astronomical fees, but we always seem to sign a lot of players for those sort of 15 to 20 million price tags, which is good to see. But again, you get the odd season where we do sign that Richarlison or that Ndombele for a big fee. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, we'll move on to Paratici's best mate here in Antonio Conte. Now, where do I start? He's a man that nearly came in that summer that we've already touched on. Came out with the post with him standing next to an English seal, whatever it was in the end, which got you guys all into an absolute frenzy, and all I could see everywhere was Conte's coming, he's coming to Spurs, he's coming. And then he came and conquered, kind of. And now, every 3 days, there seems to be a link with him leaving. Why? And what are your thoughts on the whole thing as a whole, and do you think he will go?
Conte leaving will not happen. I'm telling you now. I think from what I've seen, it's basically Juventus journalists that are mortified by their start to the season. They're angry with their club, with having Allegri in, who's been pretty poor since he came back to the club. And they're essentially just trying to convince themselves that Conte would be willing to come back to the club and take them to the top of the league and win the league again. I do think they're in absolute dreamland. I mean, you've got top Spurs journalists like Alistair Gold reporting that Conte is willing to sign a new contract. All he needs is the club to make him the offer. So I seriously can't stress enough to Spurs fans, I don't think Conte will leave. Not at the moment.
Okay, fair enough. Just to humour me here, if he did go, massive if, but if he did go, who could replace him?
I see many fans mentioning Poch's name. Don't get me wrong, Poch, one of my favourite managers in recent Spurs history. Mm-hmm. He took us again to that Champions League final. He took us close to the league title. He probably did what no other manager for us has done with the squad he had. We didn't have the greatest squad. We didn't spend the most amount of money. Mm-hmm. But I feel like a reunion for him could almost, as I say, go a bit like Allegri, where he comes back and it just doesn't feel the same. If we were to go with someone, as I mentioned earlier with Wolves, that Julian Lopetegui, he's just a manager that really interests me. I think when we were linked with Conte after Nuno went, he was a name that was sprouted around a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I really would be interested to see his football at the club.
Okay, fair enough. Lopetegui then would be the answer. I mean, I'll throw one at you, and you can bat this down if you like to. Diego Simeone.
I actually would be quite interested in him. Whether he'd leave Atletico or not, I'm not sure. But his mentality, similar to Conte, that sort of ruthless mentality where if your player doesn't give 100%, they're out kind of mentality. I would be interested to see him at the club. He's one of those managers that shows passion. He doesn't sit back and just sort of let things happen. He deals with situations. So yeah, he's a good one. Okay,
fair enough. We'll move on to the current season. You're doing fairly well as a club. You know, you're looking like you're going to push for Champions League football. For those that haven't been following Spurs too closely, how has the season started?
Yeah, we've had a good season in terms of results for sure. We sit third as we speak in the table. We're top of our Champions League group as well. The football itself hasn't been amazing. I'm a season ticket holder this year, my first season ticket, so I've been to all of our games at home this season, and we've played some good football, but we've also played some poor football, and this comes all in the space of about 20 minutes during one game. We seem to fluctuate big time. We go in sort of waves where we have a great 10 minutes and then a dismal 10 minutes and 20 minutes. But in terms of results, we can't complain. I'd rather take a 1-0 with some poor football than play well and lose 3-0 or something like that. So I don't think we can complain where we sit at the moment.
Okay, fair enough. And then before we round off this, I want to look ahead to the rest of the season for Spurs, not for that big month where we've got everything off and we're all going into a frenzy to watch England get knocked out in the round of 16 to Uruguay. How is the rest of the season going to go for Spurs? Will Champions League football happen? Brace yourself. Are you going to win a trophy?
Yeah, there's always the T word that comes into the question every season with Spurs. I mean, it's been too long now. I would have been about 7 or 8 the last time we won a trophy. So it's something that I want to see at some point. But yeah, I think the usual aim for Spurs is to get top 4 nearly every season. And the way we're going at the moment, it looks like we should. I mean, we're playing decent-ish football, as I just touched upon. So I think it will be, if we keep it up after the World Cup, I think we'll be okay. Kane's playing well. Son still needs to find that little bit of form, but I'm sure in time that will come to him. But as for other cup competitions, I think we need to just try and push as far as possible in them all. I think to win a trophy in Conte's first full season, because we've got to remember he only came in about this time last year or 11 months ago. To win a trophy, even if it was the Carabao Cup or FA Cup, we'd take that in a million years. Obviously, we had that chance with against City a few years ago, which we didn't take because we sacked our manager a week before a cup final, which still to this day confuses me. But yeah, I think a trophy like that would be possible if we get a good route to the final. And then we come to the Champions League. again, the quality of teams this year is great. I mean, even for some of the underdogs, I think Club Brugge have qualified already. They're playing really well. So I think we'll make it to the quarters, but unfortunately, I just can't see us getting past there.
Okay, so quarters for the Champions League. Can I get a placement for the Premier League and the predictions for both of the domestic cups?
Yeah, for sure. So if we're going off current form, Premier League, I'm going to go for third. I do think that City will win the league, so I think third is probably about right for us, depending on whether Chelsea or Liverpool can get back up to form. I think we could go to probably the semis or the final, but again, it is Tottenham at the end of the day. So if we get a good run, I think the final. If we're lucky, probably the semis.
Okay, fair enough, mate. That will round off the first of the two Tottenham Hotspur segments. What we'll do is we'll take another short break here before you come back to listen to us talk about some Tottenham transfer targets. We are back to talk about Spurs transfer targets. Now, I've got 15 transfer targets on the screen, as I'm sure you can all see. If you're watching this as a video, you can actually see the transfer targets on your screen. If you're watching this, well, if you're listening to this on the podcast, wait until the video comes out on Monday and you'll be able to watch me put them all into the tiers. Right. Let's start off with goalkeepers. We've got 5 tiers for this. We've got the top one being sign him up. Quite self-explanatory. Get him into the club now. Quality addition, he'd be okay, just not needed, and then stay away. Stay away category is, I could liken that to, who's been a truly shambolic Spurs signing? Ndombele? 70 million was it for a player who's being loaned out to Roma? Yeah. All right. Stay away and Ndombele. I'm not going to rename it, but we'll go with that. All right. We'll start with goalkeepers. Now, which goalkeeper should we start with? Let's start with Unai Simon. Are you going to put Unai Simon?
Yeah, Simon is a decent option. I mean, he's been in La Liga for I think some time now. He plays for Spain and in the national team. I think he would go for me in the would be okay tier. He's a half decent keeper, but I don't think he's one of those keepers that you're confident with at the back.
Alright, fair enough. So Simon straight into he'd be okay. We'll move on to the next goalkeeper now, and someone that's impressed a lot of people recently. In Porto's number 1, Diogo Costa.
Yeah, again, as you mentioned, he's sort of recently picked up, and a lot of people have seen him and thought, wow, okay, maybe this guy is the real deal. He's looked like a decent keeper from what I've seen of him. I can't say I've seen absolute tons of him, but from what I've seen, I'd put him in probably quality addition. Okay, fair enough. He'd be a very young guy to get in as well, so could possibly give you the option of understudying Lloris for a year or two. Yeah. Would he be up? I don't know. He'd be a very good option, and I agree with that one. Next, we've got one of 2 goalkeepers I've got on here from the Prem, Illan Meslier. Meslier for me, he's going straight into sign them up. I think I think he's the youngest out of the lot actually. I think he has a lot of potential as well. Being French, and you mentioned being an understudy to Lloris, I think he would probably be our best bet. Obviously he hasn't got the greatest lead side in front of him, hence he concedes a few and doesn't keep a lot of clean sheets, but I think out of the options he's one of the top ones, so sign him up for me. Fair enough, mate. And then we'll move on to the final goalkeeper I've here in Robert Sanchez of Brighton. Again, similar to a few of the others, he's one of those keepers that does his job well. He's a decent keeper. I think over the last season or so for Brighton, he's definitely become a lot better for them. He's one of those players I'm not sure would... I just couldn't see Spurs fans linking with him, maybe. Okay. So for that reason, I'd probably just put would be okay. Would be okay. Okay, so goalkeeper-wise, then we're getting Meslier in, are we, for the summer? Yeah, 100%. All right, fair enough. And you said you wanted to touch on Lloris. Would that be to overtake Lloris? What would be going on with Lloris there? I think for Lloris, maybe pin him down with another year on his contract, and then over the probably next season, say we signed him in the summer, just working with him, just learning what he does, how he does it. give him that experience of a World Cup winner, a World Cup winning captain, just to be able to communicate with him, and then maybe gradually over the season phase Meisler into the first 11.
Okay, fair enough. So bring him in, and then sort of transition from Lloris into Meslier before Meslier is that first choice keeper. Fair enough. We'll move on to centre backs now, and again we've got 4 centre back options. We'll start with one that you were heavily linked with over the summer. Another centre back that would come from Italy, from the Serie A, and it's Bastoni.
Yeah, Bastoni probably was the most linked player to us that we didn't actually sign in the transfer window. I think every other day there was a piece of information coming out about him, whether that be coming to us or not. In my opinion, he's a sign me up. He's a top tier centre back. He fits that Italy criteria that Paratici loves and breathes. He's also quite young as well, so he's got a lot of potential, which fits the Spurs transfer system. We like to sign those sort of young, upcoming players. I think Perisic was probably one of the only ones that doesn't go into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, he's a sign me up, definitely.
I mean, just touching on that, I don't think there's anyone on this list that's sort of older than 26, 27, which again proves to that young sort of targets. All right, we'll move on to another left-footed player now, in Evan Ndika.
Yeah, he's a strange one, Ndika. He's very briefly mentioned during the summer. I think there was 1 or 2 people that sort of came out and said we were interested in, but nothing came of it. He's a decent player, but I'm just not 100% sure he'd be the right fit for us and the level that we need him. So for me, I think it would just be not needed. Not needed,
okay. One thing with Ndika that is worth mentioning is his contract is up this summer. So could possibly be a free transfer there if he was someone you were to look at. And I'll ask this question. I was going to save it to the end of the centre backs, but I'll ask you it now. Do you only need 1 centre back, or do you need 2?
I do think we need 2. I think that Lenglet's only come on a loan deal. I don't believe there's an option in there, so he could just be going straight back at the end of the season. Ben Davies, he's a decent player, but he never gives you great games. Davison Sanchez, I always refer to him the centre-back Serge Aurier. He's one of those that could have a good game, but then the next game get a red card and make some stupid challenges. So I think we do need 2.
You do need 2. So you've said that Ndika's not needed. Being that free transfer and possibly coming in as a backup, would that change your mind? I'll keep him in not needed, but would that possibly change your mind as a transfer to Spurs?
Knowing he'd be on a free transfer, possibly. Again, that fits the Spurs agenda of signing cheap players for getting good deals and stuff. So if he came in as a backup, I wouldn't be too disappointed with it.
Okay, fair enough. We'll move on to the next one now in Edmund Tapsoba.
Yeah, another sort of Bundesliga centre back. His name was reported the odd time. I think a bit more than Ndika actually. But again, I'm just not sure how much he'd cope with the Premier League and how well he would do. He's a good physical defender, but I'm not sure his game would suit our style of system. So for me, it'd probably be, again, just not needed.
Okay, fair enough. And then for the final centre-back, we've got another guy that you were heavily linked with in the summer, Pau Torres.
Yeah, similar to Bastoni, he's a top-tier centre-back. I think we were going to go for him a year or 2 back before this summer window, and it didn't end up happening. But for me, it'd be straight to sign him up, as you mentioned, with us probably needing 2 centre-backs if we're being realistic. I think he's definitely a great option.
Okay, fair enough. We'll move on to the right backs now, because I've got 2 right backs here. Obviously, I know you've got 3, but none of them are good. Well, 2 of them aren't good enough. We don't know about Spence. We've got no clue. He could be great, as my iPad falls. He could be great, or he could be the worst man known to mankind because he's played about 6 minutes. So who knows? We are looking at right backs anyway. We'll start with one who has impressed an awful lot of people. Ever since he's moved from Celtic to Leverkusen. It's Jeremy Frimpong.
Yeah, Jeremy Frimpong, I think, is a class player. He did well at Celtic, then got his move to Leverkusen. I think he suits more that right wing back role. He's got that good pace, good energy. I would be more than happy to see him brought into the club, but only if one of the likes of Emerson Doherty were to leave. and he's had a great start to the season. So if we're basing it off current form, I'd say a quality addition to the side.
Okay, fair enough. And then we'll look at the other right back I've got down here, Pedro Porro.
Yeah, I think he's a decent player in the Portuguese league. I believe he used to play for Man City.
He did, yeah.
Back in a few years ago. So one of those players that you think, did Man City let him go for a reason? Was he not just cutting it? Or are we saying that you look at Man City when you've got fullbacks like João Cancelo and Kyle Walker, is he ever going to get ahead of them? Probably not. So for me, I think he'd go into would be okay, because we didn't really see too much of him at a Premier League level, if anything. But he could be a good addition for us, but I'd still say would be okay.
Okay, fair enough. We've got 5 attackers now, so I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on all of these. We'll start with one of the 2 Roma men on here, Zaniolo.
Zaniolo, yeah, heavily linked player, a great attacking midfielder when he gets it right. The only concern with him, and I think most Spurs fans would echo this, or any fan really, his injury record is atrocious. I mean, he's picked up quite a few injuries, a lot of ACLs, which obviously he can't help, but as a club, if you're looking at it from a financial perspective, are you going to invest 30 to 40 million pounds in a player that might not play for a whole year at some point? I'm not sure if you will, but if we're going in terms of quality, for me it would be a quality addition, because I do think he's a good player despite his injuries.
Okay, so you've put him in quality addition. Does that mean you would still stay away from him even though you think he's a good player?
I would take him. I would take him at Spurs, but as I say, it'd have to be for the right price if we're taking his injury record into consideration.
Okay, fair enough. We'll move on to Dani Olmo now.
Yeah, Olmo's one of those players that Spurs probably need as an attacking midfielder, but I just think someone with a bigger stature than him would be better. I think he's not the biggest of people. He's a good player, don't get me wrong, but I'm not sure if he'd suit the physicality of the Premier League. And he's one of those players that's played well for Leipzig, but I'm just not 100% sure he'd make it. So for me, it's just not needed.
Just not needed. Okay, fair enough. Let's go for the best attacking midfielder in the Premier League. No, stop that. Best attacking midfielder in the world now, James Maddison.
Maddison, I think, as a Spurs fan, exactly where I'm going to put him is going straight to sign them up. He's a player that Spurs fans, especially during the window, we were heavily linked with, and we wanted him bad. We were screaming out for him at some point. I'm sure you'd agree. He's had a great start to the season. He scored against us as well with a pretty good goal, I have to admit. Good finish. And with Leicester's poor form this year, he may push for a move, I'm not sure, which could make our lives a little bit easier, because if we tempt him with a nice contract and some Champions League football, I can't imagine he'll want to be a Leicester player too much longer.
No, I'm very clued up on the Maddison situation, and he loves the club. He's genuinely been in pain at times this season through how badly we've been doing, and as a fan I want to see that. He was heavily linked with the move to both you and Newcastle in the summer, and apparently Newcastle are interested again in January, as I'm sure you are. 18 months left in his contract now, I do believe, and I think he will be going, at which point then I will book my train to Luton. Jeremy Pino.
Yeah, Pino's one of those young players that is sort of coming up through the ranks, I think, now, and he looks good, but he suits that sort of young player criteria that we look for at Tottenham, but again, he is quite young, so I'm not sure how well he'd suit the side. I think it would be another situation with Udogie, for example, where he'd come in and just be loaned straight back out to either the club we brought him from, or another club in the Premier League or La Liga or something like that. If we're going off the basis that he'd be loaned straight back out, for me, it would be okay, because it'd probably take a good 2 to 3 seasons for him to be actually integrated into the first team side.
Okay, fair enough. And then the last one we've got, Lorenzo Pellegrini.
Pellegrini, is a great player. I think he's doing quite well for Roma at the moment. He's a free kick master as well, which we seem to lack at Spurs, similar with James Maddison actually. We just do not have a free kick taker, so even if we brought someone to do that, I'd be quite happy. My only concern with him would be that Jose just wouldn't sell him to us. Jose, I think, left on quite bad terms, obviously being sacked a week before a cup final.
Yep.
So he'd either make a move very difficult or try to price us out of a move, essentially. So, but again, if we're going off quality, I'd say it would be a quality addition because he's still a very good player. Okay,
fair enough. Before we do round off this, we need someone in stay away. We've got 3 guys in the just not needed section. We've got Ndika, Tapsoba and Olmo. Can you give me one of these to go and stay away?
I would go for probably Tapsoba if I was to put anyone in there. I just think he wouldn't fit that Tottenham role.
Fair enough. And then I want to get your rankings actually of the sort of positions of the order you'd go for them. Obviously goalkeepers, you've got Meslier first and you've got Costa second. Out of Simon or Sanchez, which one would you kind of prefer?
100% Sanchez in that point, because he Premier League experience and he does look good this season. Okay,
fair enough. Centre backs wise, you've got Bastoni and Torres. Which one of them would you prioritise?
Bastoni, mainly because he worked with Conte before at Inter. He's probably Paratici's number 1 target as well, being that Italian links. And I just feel he's got that potential in him to become a top player.
Fair enough. And then obviously you've got Ndika and Tapsoba. Right backs, have already clarified that. We've got Frimpong and then Porro. And then attacking midfielder / winger wise, I've just kind of grouped these all together. Maddison being the top target. Which one would you pick out of Zaniolo and Pellegrini?
I probably would go with Pellegrini. If we are going off injuries, as I say, Zaniolo is just such a big risk. While he is a great player, the risk is always there, and sometimes you just can't get past that. So I think Pellegrini will probably be the one I'd take. Okay, fair enough. And then we've obviously got Pino and Olmo. That is the end of the tier list for this week, and I think that's also the end of the show. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, mate. You've been, as I say, someone I've followed for a long time, and again, a great place for Spurs news. Before we do round off the show, where do the listeners need to go and look to find more of your stuff? Yeah, so if you just head to Instagram, type in the Spurs, I should be one of the first pages to follow. Provide sort of all your Spurs news multiple times a day, so be sure to drop a follow. Yeah, for sure, go and do that. The Spurs news over on Instagram, one of the best Spurs pages out there, and the _Spurs_news is the forum. As I say, if you just search up the Spurs on Insta, it should pop up. But mate, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. You're welcome back anytime, and I'll catch all of you lovely listeners again next week. See ya.